Hello, and welcome back to another week of Let's Discuss with Meg Duke, where we discuss some things perinatal and all things mental health. I am so excited. I have two guests this week. It's going to be so wonderful. Misha McCoy, M.Ed., she, her, is an ABS certified sexologist and human sexuality doctoral student whose research focuses on Black sexuality, intersectionality, systems of power, and pleasure. She's the owner of Misha's Room and a co-founder of the Queer Wellness Network. Misha's Room is a space for intentional reflection that uses creative expression to dismantle oppressive norms and promote sexual positivity through one-on-one coaching sessions, educational workshops, lectures, and trainings. Queer Wellness Network is a nonprofit organization that increases access to sex therapy and sex education resources for BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities using a pay-it-forward model. Misha's approach to education encourages authenticity through poetry, storytelling, and critical discourse. She deeply believes that white supremacy is the root of all evil and works to diligently dismantle systems of oppression. Jake Ryan is a licensed MFT in California and pursuing his PhD in human sexuality with a focus on a healthier masculinity. He's written one book already, Be Your Own Therapist, and is now working on his second book, You Don't Need a Therapist, which I love those titles so much, both of which combat the difficulty many people have in accessing therapy. Jake believes humans are resilient and resourceful and sometimes just need a little direction, which he's happy to provide, believing that individual growth contributes to collective growth. He's proud to have co-founded Queer Wellness Network with Misha because of its focus on increasing access to therapy and relevant sex ed for people who aren't usually considered. Black and queer liberation are interrelated struggles, and we're stronger together. So by looking out for each other, we can create a world that values all human life. You all, thank you so much for being here. What a gift.
Thanks so much for having us.
It is my absolute pleasure. Absolutely. And what beautiful things to hear you say. Like I said, the titles of your books, they make me smile. So wonderful. So we'll definitely get into that. So I wanted to start out by asking, how do we know each other?
Yeah. So yeah, Meg, you know my friend Shay, who is a friend from my master's program. So it's always exciting to just meet people who nerd out about the same things that you do. Had so many great conversations about just different aspects of being a therapist and all the models of marriage and family therapy with Shay. And so it's nice to know that, I know you're an LCSW, but we obviously do very similar work. And so just love anyone who's a big proponent of mental health. And so I'm really glad that she was able to connect us.
Yes, absolutely. So thanks to Shay. Yes. And then of course, Misha, we met through Jake.
Yes, I also listened to a couple of your episodes, including the one with Natasha, who's one of our other classmates. So it was like, okay, yes, this is gonna be beautiful.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is, and actually that is why Shay hooked me up with Jake, because I said I wanted to have somebody who is studying sex therapy and sexuality on my show because it's such an important perinatal conversation. And so I say that about a lot of things, different topics and whatever, but that one's one that I was really excited about. So I'm glad you had a chance to listen to that. Absolutely. So we will just jump on in. How did you two meet each other?
So Jake and I met in our Human Sexuality doctoral program. I want to say it was fall of 2019?
19, yeah.
It feels like that was so long ago.
A different lifetime ago.
A whole different world. But Jake and I are classmates. We met in, I want to say, our first Human Sexuality academic residency in 2019. I'm from New Orleans. Jake is from San Diego. And the way our program is set up, we all go to San Francisco for the residencies 3 times a semester. And so we got to meet and start talking about sex immediately and to hang out. It was a great experience.
Amazing. That's so great. And then, so from there, how did the Queer Wellness Network kind of evolve? How did it come to be?
Yeah. So our program, I love it. It's because it's in San Francisco, it's true to the city. It's got a really big social justice slant. Sexuality is so political. Didn't realize it coming in, but once it was, presented to us, I was like, wow, there's so much going on here behind the scenes. And so just, being in a class with Misha, hearing her opinions, I remember said something very early on that was like, oh, this girl gets it. Like, she knows that white supremacy is, the biggest illness in our society, and so many other challenges stem from that. And I just loved her outspoken nature. And the fact that, she was as committed to helping to take care of our communities as I was, where we all came into the program with different backgrounds. We all want to go different places with it. But there was something there that I was like, we seem very much on the same page about things. So we talked like, hey, how do we put our education into practice? Because what we're learning doesn't do the world any good if we're not doing something with it. And so we didn't want to just learn things for the sake of learning. We wanted to learn, okay, what are the challenges? What are the obstacles? And what can we do with our privilege and our education and also our responsibility to make other people's lives better? And so we just kind of came up with this idea of like, hey, what if we helped make meaningful support easier to access for people who don't generally have that access?
Definitely.
Wow.
Wellness Network was more of a way for, like Jake mentioned, to put our academic scholarship into practice. Our program trains scholar practitioners, which is why I think I was even more entitled to lean in to work with Jake, because I already kind of knew where he was coming from. I love his personality. I know he has a really, really great heart. And he has a lot of access and information too. So he has a wealth of knowledge to share with individuals. And I think it's amazing for us to come together to collaborate to dismantle barriers that typically make accessing quality, competent care a lot more difficult for community members, especially Black, Indigenous, people of color, as well as LGBTQ plus folks. So we really came together to try to dismantle some of those barriers that exist.
Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful. And tell me more about, what is the Queer Wellness Network? What is it?
You want to go ahead with that one, Misha?
I don't mind. So Queer Wellness Network is a nonprofit organization that we came up with for us to be able to, again, increase access to quality mental and sexual health resources. Queer Wellness Network currently shares different events that are going on. We share different information. We have our website where individuals who are seeking support can just log on to our chat feature and then say where they are, leave their name, and then a request that they need. And it could be trying to find a LGBTQ plus inclusive therapist. It could be finding access to STI health resources. It could be, hey, I need a person to talk to, and I would love some community engagement in some kind of way, shape, or form, or even sharing resources in general, like books, podcasts, workbooks, articles, different things like that, to be able to improve access to education for these BIPOC and LGBTQ plus individuals. We are also building our mental health fund, which will be a fund that we are using for our pay it forward model. So individuals who are a bit more well off, or even organizations that want to make donations and things like that, will be able to contribute to that fund, and then we'll subsidize therapy services or counseling services for individuals who might not necessarily be able to afford it in other situations or without that subsidized rate. We will also use this same method to amplify and uplift the work of a lot of Black, Indigenous, people of color that are sex educators, that we were able to amplify what they have going on and increase access to information that's by and for the communities that we're a part of, and the communities that they aim to serve as well. So Queer Wellness Network offers kind of like wraparound support for the individuals in these multiple communities that have been historically marginalized. Did you want to add anything, Jake?
Yeah, just a few things. I mean, as you're talking, I'm like, wow, we really are aiming to do it all, but we're excited to be doing this work. It's just we looked at some pillars that we wanted to focus on from the beginning, just mental health, education, advocacy, community. We'll work towards doing some research, because having people who are of these communities doing this research, it's going to yield much better results, because we're not going to come at it as from a one down position of like, hey, what's wrong with these people? We can study them for who they are, not for failing to live up to the standards that white supremacy sets. So really the main thing is just there are resources all over the country, which is great. But there doesn't really seem to be a national thing, and people are more mobile these days. And so we want to set up something so that if someone's moving from, state whatever to another state, they can find that community, they can find resources, they can find a primary care provider who's Black if that's important to them, or queer if that's important to them. So we really just want to, help people achieve that wellness and be matched with people who actually care about their well-being, not just a doctor or therapist who's kind of like, oh, this person. So.
Yes, yeah. Somebody who really has a vested interest in their concerns versus, I'm just trying to fill my 3 o'clock spot on a Wednesday afternoon, and this person's got good insurance. So cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
especially because there's so many times where individuals can go into spaces seeking care and end up experiencing even more harm.
Yes.
Can't even name the number of times I've gone to a physician or I've went to a mental health professional and I had to explain different components of my life, to where now we spent 45 of my 50-minute session with me explaining what I mean by a wife or what I mean by non-monogamy and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And sometimes having to defend, and it's like we should never have to defend ourselves to a provider. They should be on our side, and it's sad that they aren't always. But yeah, we are trying to build that network of people that we vetted them so that the people that we match with providers never have to worry, is this person actually on my side? Because they will be.
Yes. I love that, the way that it's one thing to have to describe a specific certain lifestyle. This is how I feel comfortable in my choices and my experiences in life. And it's another thing entirely to then feel like you have to defend it. And so you've heard a lot of experience in that situation, and the people that you're vetting in your system and your people who have your stamp of approval, or people that we know that, I'm going to be curious and ask questions, but I'm certainly not going to be judgmental.
Right.
Okay.
And we also know that knowledge is vast, so no one person knows absolutely everything.
Of
But
course.
it's another thing about being open to learning and receiving information without it coming from a judgmental space or a judgmental place, where now it's like, I don't know, maybe I should have lied to my gynecologist. I'm not sure if, this is something that I'm going to be okay with doing. So being able to feel comfortable enough to show up as your full self and be honest and transparent with these people that are supposed to be there to provide care and some form of support service is extremely important. So we want to make sure that we dismantle those different obstacles that are often in people's place and, help them pursue wellness.
Absolutely. And that's so wonderful to hear. I love the pay it forward too, because I know there are a lot of people out there who are experiencing, they see the things that are going on, they feel the frustration, they are empathetic in certain ways, and they say, how do I help? What do I do? And so you're giving people a very, boots on the ground conversation of helping pay for somebody's therapy, for example. Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to kind of go along with that piece of like, how do you all feel it's a meaningful way for people to become an ally? You can't just slap a label on yourself like, oh, I'm white and straight, ally.
Yes.
So what is it a meaningful way for people to get to that space in a helpful and useful way?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on that, and so that is one of the things is we do want to educate. Like we said, we'll provide relevant sex education for members of our community, but it's also important to teach allies so that they can be supportive. Because I know a good number of people who they'll go to a gay bar on the weekend, like, yeah, I'm an ally, and it's like it's a little bit more than that. It's speaking up, calling your legislators and saying, hey, this anti-trans bill, this anti-drag bill, like, it's not it. Like, you need to cancel that bill. It's going to marches for us. It's learning. Almost everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but almost everyone has internet access. Don't go to your queer friend, don't go to your Black friend and expect them to do the emotional labor of teaching you things that in today's world you can learn for yourself. And I generally hate the word should, but you should be educating yourself. It's people have questions, and I think sometimes people are scared of saying the wrong thing, but Google, that way you're not putting the burden on someone else. You're not embarrassing yourself by showing what you don't know. and really understanding what it means to be a person of color or a LGBTQ person, because I think so often people who want to think of themselves as allies, they don't think consciously do it, but I think they do kind of see us in a one down position. And it's like, no, that's just your conditioning from the world. There is nothing wrong with any of us. And so really finding the beauty in our experience, because yeah, there's some sadness and pain, but it's not just that. And it's really, what's the word? Just not minimalistic, but something to think that that's all that there is to our experience.
Yeah, kind of putting it into like a one-dimensional thing of like, oh, no, there are very many things that are going on instead of just the pain and some sadness you talked about.
Yeah, something I like is I saw something, and I think it's always, I find ways to work it into almost every conversation is, being Black is not the problem. Racism is the problem. Being gay or being trans is not the problem. Homophobia and transphobia are the problem. And so reminding ourselves and all would-be allies that it's not our Blackness or our queerness that is the challenge. It's what you've been told to think about those aspects of our identities that is the problem.
Definitely. And I'd add that it's important to acknowledge the systems. So like Jake was mentioning, the fact that I'm Black isn't an issue, is racism that's actually the issue, or the fact that I'm LGBTQ plus isn't the problem, it's transphobia and homophobia that's the issue. That connects deeply to the systems that we all have to navigate. So taking the time to really learn more about the systems, this white supremacy system that we have to navigate that ends up unfortunately causing so much disruption and obstacles and oppression for a lot of communities, especially those with intersecting identities. It kind of like multiplies or magnifies the consequences of navigating these systems. If individuals aren't necessarily being harmed by these systems as much or experience some form of immunity to the consequences of white supremacy, racism, transphobia, capitalism, all of those different components of existing, then they tend to sometimes water down, I'll say, the consequences. It's like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that deep. But I literally had a student come in my office today and talk about how he's terrified of presenting in his feminine way as a Black gay man, because he's like, oh, I don't know if something might happen to me today or tomorrow. And even though nothing has yet, that anxiety, that worry, that fear that consistently exists because you're navigating these systems is really important to acknowledge. And so some ways that I encourage individuals to be allies, like Jake mentioned, educate yourself, go a little bit further than a Google search, pick up a book, read a podcast, listen to these communities, listen to Black women, listen to trans folks, listen to queer folks, and believe them. Believe them when they talk about their experiences, believe us when we share what happened, what we would like to see in this world, which is another reason why Queer Wellness Network intentionally does research. Well, one, we are members of the communities that are conducting, that we are actually researching, one, and two, we're actually amplifying the voices of these communities that have often been historically erased or marginalized from other research. I'd also add that there's books that you can look at. There's this one specific chapter in Hood Feminism that's called Allies, Anger, and Accomplices. It's like one of the last chapters of the book Hood Feminism. It's very, very great. It talks about how some individuals will identify as allies, or it's like, okay, this is a problem, so I can acknowledge a problem exists. But until you get angry, like you start to feel real emotion related to another individual's struggle that they have as a result of the systems that they're navigating, is when you move into the phase or the stage of becoming an accomplice. Like, stand by me, put something at risk. Let me see you really like stand with us when we are fighting some of these battles that we end up having to deal with, like those that happen in legislation, those attacks on a lot of queer and trans individuals, or even when we look at police brutality against Black and brown communities. These are all factors where allies and accomplices can really show up to support those communities.
Yeah, and it's beautiful the way that you can differentiate between ally, which is like, I see you, that sucks for you, and an accomplice who's, I'll be the getaway driver. Like, I'm going with you.
I'm gonna push you out the way. I always say, sometimes when I'm talking to like well-meaning white people, they'll say, oh, I wish so much for you. I wish this was different. And I'm just like, if you really want to see me adequately compensated and I deserve that job, quick and recommend me. Do that. Let me see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that is a tough thing, a space to be in, of like, I have seen so many people be like, I'm white, what do I do? And it's like, no, you can't rely on other people to do the emotional and intellectual labor for you. It needs to be something that you take the time and energy to exert to be able to feel that you understand, and have some space to make some mistakes, and certainly can ask some questions, but also I want to acknowledge the listening part. I think people are often, I don't know, I just feel like generally globally we live in a really defensive world where we feel the need to be perfect all the time, and so therefore let me tell you why I'm not wrong. Like, no, but that's not. And instead it's just saying, like, listen and believe.
Listen and believe. Please.
Defensiveness says, yeah, my experience matters more than yours, and it blocks connection. It's uncomfortable. I had my own struggle with learning about white supremacy, and that thought of, but I didn't do anything. I didn't own slaves. Okay, that may be true, but the system is still in place to very much benefit people who look like me. And so I like to remind people, when it comes to privilege, like, I can opt out of the fight for racial equality at any time. That is white privilege.
Yes.
I could go, you know what? This is hard work. I have other things I want to do, and I can. Misha and other people of color can't just walk away,
right?
Because Black and brown communities are targeted. And so, yeah, I think that came up a lot with, after the George Floyd murder, there were a lot of allies showing up to marches, and then some of the enthusiasm for this fight fizzled out, and that is a very clear display of privilege. Is like Misha said, allies need to care the same extent as the people in the community, and that's how change happens, because there are so many of us here that we can come together and make a difference. But if the people with privilege opt out, nothing's going to change, and that's why we need allies.
And is it in addition to consistently learning, consistently listening, and consistently believing, oftentimes even organizations will take this DEI or equity focus, and then we're giving you 2-3 trainings and we never have a conversation about it. Or you'll say, yeah, of course I'm committed to this. People will put a statement or something like that out, and then there are no organization-based internal changes or modifications to try to improve some of the circumstances for these historically marginalized individuals that are part of these organizations or connected to these communities. So trying to really encourage, I try to consistently encourage allies to continue learning. Don't think it's just a 1-2 off thing. A training cannot help just fix it all. You have to.
But I got this certificate. What are you talking about?
What do you mean? I did the thing at Cornell. I'm like on it, right? No, that's not necessarily it. Like you have to commit yourself to a life of becoming an accomplice and being committed to supporting communities that you may not necessarily be a part of, but acknowledging that right is right, wrong is wrong, and we all deserve equitable access to resources, to support, to love, and to live.
Yeah.
We all deserve the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That's what the people say, but they didn't have me in that when they wrote it.
No,
That's right.
America, I always say, it has great values on paper, and it's our job to make sure that we're living them out.
Yes, yeah. Well, I like your tagline in your Instagram that says this logo will still be rainbow even after Pride Month ends, and I think that really kind of encapsulates the DEI initiatives, the George Floyd energy, the things that kind of got like, oh well, we have to make something, we have to put something out there, and then it's like, oh hey, well June's over, so like gay people, can you all just like go back and sit down, and then we'll see you again next June, like maybe mid-May.
Yeah,
and
we're still here.
And it's like, but nothing else has changed for the rest of the people that we're talking about. And there are even, there are a lot of articles out there that talk about like the quiet defunding of DEI. People were like, oh, we're going to put all this money into our our DEI situation in our company, and then it's like, okay, and where did that go? And what are we doing now? And so on. Yeah.
Crickets.
Yeah.
About carrying you around, not just during the select months. And yeah, it's not just checking a box like, oh, cool, we did this one thing. Like, you gotta show up consistently.
Yeah, because I do feel like, I mean, there's so many things to talk about. I mean, there was another mass shooting on Monday. And if I may take a moment and be selfish, I'm actually from New Albany, Indiana, born and raised, and my brother and cousin both work at hospitals in downtown Louisville. So my cousin's a nurse practitioner, a neuro nurse practitioner. So she was there dealing with all of that, and so it literally hits closer to home physically, but emotionally we just continue to see things like this happen. We continue to see, I mean, these drag bans, my goodness, I really thought this was just in my place of privilege. I was like, okay, this is just like a distraction technique from guns, like it's gonna blow over. And there's just legislature everywhere. In Kansas right now we have 13 active trans, anti-queer laws on the table. I think there are like 51 in Texas.
That's where
I'm sorry, what was that?
That's where I am. Like, ooh. And I work.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I moved here from Houston. And I'm licensed in Texas, so I have clients in Texas, and these are conversations that we're having, and it's like that feeling of helplessness of like, I actually literally, but just before we got on this recording, I added my senators' phone numbers to my phone. And I'm like, I'm just going to call them every single day and be really annoying as a white, straight, cis, het lady here in Kansas and be like, hey, can we talk about drag and why it has nothing to do with you? Leave people alone. Can we talk about guns? Can we, and
there's so many other things that we could actually talk about.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, I think in Tennessee, the first offense for being in drag in public is a misdemeanor, and the second one is like a felony with a 6-year imprisonment. Which, for what? Why does it bother you? I've never understood. Like, let people live.
It raises so many questions because it's like, well, is a trans woman in drag in public? Is that how people are going to interpret her experience and her expression? There's so much room for interpretation that can be ran with in a harmful way. That's, I mean, not to say that the legislation itself isn't harmful. It definitely is, but it also can be very, very harmful for individuals that get misgendered. My wife is masculine presenting. Are you going to say she's dressed like a drag king on a regular Tuesday when she's walking up the street? Like, what kind of fears now arise for individuals? And with all of this legislation coming out, it's even more important for Queer Wellness Network to continue to expand our reach because, like I mentioned with my student, there's a lot of anxiety that comes up for people, and it could be just existing. I don't know what may happen next. And because you really don't know, there's so much uncertainty and anxiety, which can lead to depression, and then overuse of substances and substance abuse and all of these different kind of like snowball consequences that negatively impact people that I really don't think a lot of our legislative or political leaders are considering or just don't care about when they are making a lot of these different laws or pitching a lot of these different proposals that end up harming people.
Yeah, like, absolutely.
The one positive, there's always got to be a positive, but it certainly doesn't outweigh anything else. But the positive is it does show that, us showing up for ourselves, us living authentically, it scares the people in power, and they're fighting back in any way that they can, because they know that we do have power. It would be nice if they could, maybe grow the heck up and act like adults. But yeah, it's they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't know that we have something. And so we're not going anywhere. Queer people have always existed. People have, been all different colors, where we have the experiences and the histories that we have community. Through these attacks, we learn to lean on community members more because, like we were saying earlier, like in group gets it. So I'm always reminded that, like, I'm not alone in this fight. There is community. but it sure would be nice to not have to keep fighting.
Yeah.
And Queer Wellness Network also works diligently to let those people know who are in these places where it seems so isolating to be like that queer person or that Black queer person, where it's like, okay, there's two of us here. Like, what are we supposed to do in this space? We try our very best to remind individuals that beyond the physical access, you have community, you have people, there is love, there is family, there is support that exists across the country for you, even you in Champaign, Illinois. Like there are places and spaces and people that are dedicated to supporting you. And it really, really, from what I've noticed, helps individuals not necessarily feel as isolated and feel like they have more options.
Yeah, because you're right. It's oh my gosh, I'm going to quote Harry Potter on my podcast, but
I
I'm so
love
sorry.
Harry.
Okay, good.
I don't like her, but I love Harry.
I actually literally I had wrist surgery and I got it covered with the Harry Potter tattoo. So anyway, I'm so sorry for those of you who are like, Meg, it's a children's book. But Luna Lovegood talks to Harry and she's like, if I were Voldemort, I would want you to feel alone and by yourself. And because that way you don't feel like you have support and this is just how it's going to be. And that's where the power comes from, is that it is not just one person having a singular experience that is other. It's a beautiful and authentic life that's being lived in joy, and that it's not just you by yourself, and that there is the strength in the numbers and strength in the support.
Yeah. The HBO show We're Here was actually a big inspiration for Queer Wellness Network, because I think it's important that they were going to, you know, these small towns that were pretty clearly, a lot of them, not very LGBTQ friendly, and that message of we are here is so important. Yeah, for the, you know, there's so many towns across this country that, you know, under 10,000 people, and they're not going to generally have the resources for people who are LGBTQ, and a lot of places, you know, people of color struggle to find access. But just knowing that you're not alone, that there are people who have never met you and might never meet you, but still just want the best for you. It's one of my favorite things about being gay, is that, like, I think, you know, when you hear about like student loans and stuff, people are like, well, I had to pay them, you should have to. Every gay, queer, trans person, whatever, our greatest hope is that the younger kids don't have to suffer the way that we did. Like,
oh, I have chills. Yes.
We don't go, well, I had to, you have to. No, it stops with me. I shouldn't have had to, and I'm going to try my hardest to make sure that you grow up knowing that you are loved, you are special, and that the world is big enough for you.
That is literally what got me into education and what got me into the sexology field as a whole. It's like my lived experience as a Black queer woman from the South. I'm from New Orleans, born and raised. I was like, yeah, there's no way in hell I'm letting other people go through the experiences that I did. I will step up and I will be that representation. I'll be that advocate. I'll take some of the shots. I've taken more than enough. I'll take the L's if that's what I need to do in order to ensure that another young person doesn't have to go through a lot of those obstacles or those mental battles that I had to go through while I was coming into my own and then navigating the world as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was listening to, and I apologize, I don't know what the podcast they were on, but Alok said something about people see people living their authentic lives in a way that makes them uncomfortable, because I couldn't ever be that free, or I couldn't ever be in that space. And then therefore, if I feel restricted, feel the need to restrict other people, which is, I think, kind of not the definition of white supremacy, because there are like 17 of those, but it really, really plays with that of like, no, if you don't look exactly like us, you don't do exactly what we do, then I'm going to prevent you. And now, unfortunately, we continue to have places and power to be able to do that. And so I thought that was oh, okay, I apologize. Alok was on Jinx Monsoon's podcast. I just want to give shout out to Hi Jinx. I was like, who was Alok talking to? I couldn't remember. It was on Jinx Monsoon's podcast. And so I thought I actually paused it right there. I hit my phone and I was like, yeah, that's it. Is once again, we bring it back to fear. And it's like, ask questions, be curious, Google, read a book, but don't sit in the way of somebody else's happiness. Don't try to prevent other people from doing what brings them joy in this one short life that we have.
I think there's so much connected to a scarcity mindset
Yes.
people have. So it's like, if I let you live, then that means I can't. Or if I do this, then that means I can't or I don't. And I just don't operate in that space. I believe that you lead with love. I believe that love is abundant and we all have our own individual brilliances, which is one of the things that makes existing as a person so like beautiful. Like, I'm an educator. I don't want to be a therapist. That's not my lane. I'll let Jake lean into his brilliance and do that. And I'll lean into mine and I'll exist in my space. And there's enough room for everybody to eat as long as we move out of this scarcity mindset space. Because you think I have to harbor all of this, because if I don't, then there won't be enough. And it's like, trust the universe, trust the world we exist in, trust the earth. Like, the earth will continue to create more. Like, we will be fine. Like, there's space for us all to be able to exist. I just think people have to work past that fear that causes them to operate out of a scarcity mindset.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I also think, and this is something that I mentioned in my bio, that I'm working towards a healthier masculinity, and just realizing how much gender really is a part of our lives, but it fits in so seamlessly that like we don't even realize like how much we're conditioned to think that like there's only two, and it's like, no, that's not the reality. But the dominant binary identities, obviously they're not truly dominant, but in our society with its issues, they're positioned as dominant. And so whiteness is, I think, not really so much fleshed out, but people of color are the othered identity. There's so much character given to it, and whiteness is just kind of, it's not that. But I don't think that it's really a solid identity. And I know that as a white person, I've often, felt a lot of sadness. Like, I know that I'm Irish and Scandinavian. Doesn't mean anything to me. I don't feel as a white American that I really have a culture that I can be proud of, because white person
I think
says,
that's
"Oh,
why some of us are like, no, but I'm 23% Scottish, and let me make my kilt," because we have people who, which I'm sure you could go historically and talk about terrible Scottish people, but like, because we don't have, and I am not complaining, I am not over here sitting in a place of, but I think that's why people are like, well, again, German is also not a good one from the earlier 1900s, but because we want to be able to be like, that's not me. It's the same as like angry Black woman versus a Karen, right? Like, not an angry white person, right? A white woman, because no, like, that's somebody else. I would never be a Karen, but it's like, but all Black women are angry Black women. And I apologize to whomever said that. I have no idea where I heard that. It's not an original from my own. But I think that's it, right? Like,
you have those tropes,
yeah.
And then so yeah, whiteness, masculinity, it's the same. Masculinity is valued over femininity. And really, one thing I'm learning in my research that really connects to my personal experience is that, especially like white heteromasculinity, it's not a defined thing so much as just distance yourself from femininity and from homosexuality. Like, that's it. And it's interesting that masculinity is something that's seen as socially given. So if a guy in any moment of his life fails to uphold masculinity, which of course is just a performance, there's the threat that you are no longer a man. I was told my whole life, oh, if you're gay, then you're less of a man. And that kept me in the closet until I was 24. And then I came out and I was like, wait a second, my masculinity, my gender is a separate construct from my sexuality. So there's this threat of men of like, if you do not stay loyal to, uphold masculinity, you're a failure and everything's going to come crashing down. And it isn't. But like you said, with ALOC, like the seeing people step out of gender and be like, I don't have to do this performance if it doesn't feel good to me. I can just live as I authentically am, that scares people because, yeah, they've been told everything's going to fall apart if you stop doing this, but it happens in their unconscious. So they don't even know why they're upset. They just feel like, I have to support this. And it's like, you don't even know what you're fighting for. Like, men could be so much more free. If I had a guy tell me once, there was a pop song on the radio. He's like, wow, you're so lucky you can like this. And I was like, you can like it too. And he goes, no, but it's different because I'm straight and you're gay. And I was like, if you like a song by a female singer, like it. And he goes, yeah, it's different. And I was like, you're going to not let yourself like a song? I was like, this is a great song. So
toxic masculinity ruins the party again.
And what's wild about it is these like commitments to something that's consistently changing. Like we know that scripts and cultures are continuously being created as they're also being discussed and changed and modified. So when we think about masculinity and what it looked like, I'm specifically talking about like Black masculinity in the 70s, for example. Men were wearing platform heels, men were wearing like crop shirts with holes, and those were like the masculine men. Those were like the manly men that everybody wanted. And now it's like, oh no, you don't need to do that because that's too feminine. That's not man enough. And it's like, well, at what point do you really get to commit to something that's not changing? Like how are you so heavily committed to masculinity when it's something that's forever and ongoing changing and being modified and being created, and the standards that you have to uphold is ridiculous. Like how could you truly call yourself committed to masculinity in that way or with that definition without critically analyzing how masculinity has changed so much over the years, the decades? Really, you can go through the decades if you want to, but even going through back into the 90s and the 1900s and things, like it has evolved so much. And like if you don't sit back and critically analyze that and then question yourself, well, why am I so committed to not listening to certain songs today? As a form of showcasing my commitment to masculinity, it's like, let's be real.
Yeah, and all you're doing is, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, it's easier just commit yourself to authenticity, not to these moving targets.
Yes, yeah, all you're doing is depriving yourself of some joy in listening to your favorite bop by Ariana Grande or whoever it is. She's on my mind because she had a whole body shaming thing today. So but yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting because we talk about the difference between like biological sex and gender and what is feminine, what is masculine. You know, if you believe, as so many of these people who are the mouthpiece for these movements in, you know, Adam and Eve, it's like, well, Adam didn't walk out of the Garden of Eden in pleat front khakis and boat shoes. So that's not like, if that's the ideal man, like, again, it's the evolution of everything. Like you have this thing in your head, like this is a man and that's a woman. And it's like, okay, but again, even so far as the 70s and platform heels, like, I mean, look at John Travolta in the Saturday Night Fever, look at his outfits, right? Like,
I'm even thinking about, again, going critical to like what makes a person a man or what makes a person a woman. Oftentimes when we talk about womanhood, it's connected to the ability to reproduce, or a person that has a menstrual cycle or has a uterus. And I know plenty of women that had hysterectomies. I'm a woman that doesn't get a period without some form of estrogen to cause that to happen. And I'm a cisgender woman. Some women choose not to have children. Like there are, those things aren't necessarily like the check boxes that you have to have in order for you to be a woman. So again, let's think critically around how we define these things and how far we're willing to go to defend something that, like Jake mentioned, is a moving target.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to think of it that way. Like one of my episodes coming up soon has to be called Emphatically Childless, because I'm obviously not going to have a client on the show, but I have some clients who express that, and certainly some friends who are emphatically childless and yet happily fully identify as a woman. And there are people out there who would be like, well, it makes you less of a woman, just as the same way we would say that makes you less of a man because you listen to Ariana Grande. And it's just, I know, I guess it sounds naive in a 2023 world, but like, can't we all just like what we like and not have to put a label or a descriptor on it, and just, you like what you like and I'll like what I'll like, and
Yeah.
hey.
Not make
Love,
us about it.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love nuance. Like there's nuance to everything. That was definitely something that my therapy education taught me. I came in so type A and I was like, you know, like, how do I be prepared for this? And my teacher was like, you're never going to know what's going to walk through your door. All you can do is, just get curious, ask good questions, roll with the punches. And, one of the things, like I said earlier, that Misha was so outspoken, and that's what made me think like, yes, I love her. I had said something in one of our classes of like, oh, well, the brain prefers to think in binary. And Misha's like, that's because of colonialism. Colonialism imposed binaries. And it just like shook everything I thought I knew about the world. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, like rigid binaries are not natural. They are literally man-made. And like it is an insane thing that we expect so many people to fit in one of two discrete categories with no overlap. And it's like, what? Like that's not how humans work.
It's
Like
erasing intersex individuals, because when children grow up, even from like elementary school, preschool age, it's like, okay, boy, girl, this, that,
Yes. Yes.
inside, outside. You play with
Yes.
dolls or you play with the football. There are so many people that exist within that middle space that are erased, ignored, and then end up having to deal with the consequences of existing in a world where we've been conditioned to believe everything is binary, and it's just not true.
yeah, the
Mhm.
more we
Yeah.
can all appreciate nuance, the better we'll all be doing. Because, like, two, that's so boring. I don't want only two options. Like,
Right.
let me,
They're like here
let
and
me
there.
do
It's
whatever
polar
I want.
opposites at that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a book. You made me think of that when you mentioned like the dolls and the football. Like, Target sold a book during, and I apologize again, I'm running short on knowing where I heard things, but I have a book for my son. It's called Dolls and Trucks Are for Everyone. Well, my daughter's getting old enough now; she can read along too. But, and I thought that that was a very important thing of like just that message. My son one day wanted pigtails because I was putting them in my daughter's hair. And I'm like, great. Like, I'm never going to tell either one of my kids they can or cannot do anything because they have a certain set of genitals. Not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then he got to school and he pulled him out real quick before he went in. And I was like, oh, buddy, I spent time on those. No conversation. And then a couple days later, I put pigtails back in his sister's hair. And I was like, hey, do you want him again today? He goes, no, pigtails are for girls. And I said, never thought I'd have to say this to a white human with a penis. He's only 3, so I was like, I never want to hear you say that you can't do something because you're not a girl ever again. If you don't want pigtails, do not wear pigtails, but not because somebody told you can't because you have a penis. No,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All these things, like, yeah, people act like, oh, if I break this boundary, then I'm no longer the thing that I identify. And it's like, that's not true at all. I wear pink sometimes, doesn't make me less of a man. I wear makeup sometimes, doesn't make me less of a man. Love Ariana Grande, doesn't make me less of a man. So all these things, yeah, we're told, oh, you're a boy. Like it's like a pre-fee menu. Like, oh, we decided because of your
Yes.
gender, you have to like this. And I'm like, I only like half of that, and I like half of the other menu. So I'm gonna have a blend, and I'm still gonna call myself this because that's my right, and you don't get to tell me otherwise. But I think, yeah, so many people, Misha said a few times, think critically. People don't always like to do that. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, but it's the way forward. We need
Yeah.
It's
to
being pulled from
consider.
school so people can't learn how to do it.
But yeah,
Yeah.
we
Trust
want to give
and
people.
librarians we trust, right?
We want to, yeah, provide books and resources for people to understand these things and have the language to understand themselves and realize that you have so many more choices than the world will give you. And I think that, yeah, when everyone feels supported to live authentically, we're all just going to be doing better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you have that space where allies and everyone can come and learn and do their own Googling and their own reading and having their eyes open. I have to say there are times where I'll see something and be like, I just always understood that to be fact because that is the programming, the imperial colonial white person programming that was given to me as a person born in 1985 and ongoing. And so, and then I'll see something and be like, oh, it doesn't have to be like that. We don't even know the things that we are doing, because not all, some of them we do, but a lot of stuff we don't even know, that we're just, propagating this situation because it's just in there.
Yeah, we're just
It's
doing what we've
quote
always
unquote
done.
normal.
Yeah. I did, before I let you all go quickly, because I know I could seriously sit here and talk to you for at least 2 more hours, but I will not make you. I did want to talk a little bit though, because you all talk about unlearning sexual shame. And since we were talking about kind of unlearning some things, I was hoping we could just, like I said, if you all will give me the honor of having you back, we can unpack so many other things. But I did want to jump on that just a little bit, not jump on it, that sounded really aggressive, jump into the shame, because I think it goes along with everything we've been talking about. We've been taught to be ashamed of our bodies, of ourselves, of our likes, of our dislikes, of our wants, of our desires. And how do we help people get to a headspace where they can kind of be vulnerable and kind of step away from the shame?
You want to start, Misha, or should I?
I don't mind. So
Okay.
one thing that I try to encourage people to do is to, I've said it like 4 times already, to think critically, but to really sit down and ask yourself, like, what do I feel about this act? Do I feel shame about me liking another woman or my attraction to another woman because it doesn't feel good to me? Or is it because I wonder what other people may say about these things? Is it something that I dislike? Like me internally, it doesn't feel good to my body. It doesn't feel good in my head. It doesn't taste good. If it's like, are these decisions that I made as an individual, or am I feeling a certain way because I'm not, or potentially not, meeting societal expectations for who I am? Am I not showing up, or is this causing me not to show up in a way that society says is okay? Often, like when I do poetry and I do like erotic poetry, I publish 3 collections. I'll like talk openly about sex, and some people are like, oh no, you don't do that, you have a master's, you almost have a doctorate, like that's not okay. You have to like respect or abide by these components of respectability politics that are
People
connected
with
to
masters don't have
professionalism.
sex.
No, we don't. If you want
Give
to,
that up for grad school. Yeah.
Obviously.
if you want to be a respectable woman, you don't do those things. But
Yeah.
I try to challenge myself very often to like check in with me, to spend more time with Misha, to get to know like what she feels okay with and what she doesn't feel okay with. What's a Misha set boundary and what's a society set boundary? And when I figured those things out, it makes it a little bit easier to work through the shame I feel, because honestly, I don't give a F. I don't know if we curse here about
Oh,
what's.
you can say fuck. It's a,
Oh,
yeah, it's not a big deal.
my mama told me fuck it a long time ago, and I try to run with it. It's like, okay, if that's how people will feel, that's how they'll feel. I don't need to feel shame associated with it existing in my true authenticity, as long as it's not bringing harm to myself or someone else.
That's beautiful. I like that too. I wrote it down. A Misha set boundary versus a society set boundary. And again, we will say critical thinking so many times in this episode, but it does require that. And it requires us to get uncomfortable and really ask ourselves the questions like, I'm uncomfortable talking to myself about how comfortable I am with that. Like, and is that a problem for me, or is that a problem for y'all? And if it's a problem for you, then that's a different boundary that you can set versus I'm worried that someone else is going to think something. Yeah, I really like that a lot.
Yeah. I don't remember if it was in your most recent answer, Misha, or something you said earlier, but you mentioned scripts, and I could talk for, hours about scripts theory alone, but basically scripts are the societal messages that we all internalize that, again, are outside of our conscious awareness. Because I've been reflecting lately on like the messaging I received growing up on what it means to be gay. And before I got to college, the possibility of me being gay never crossed my mind once. So many people saw me and thought, oh, this guy is gay. I didn't know. But I remember looking back, like hearing this idea as though it was fact that, oh, gay men can't do monogamy. Gay men will never be happy. They're always looking for the next best thing. And of course, growing up in the time of AIDS, it was, if you're gay, you will get AIDS and you will die, and no one will feel bad for you because that's just your lot in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so fucked up. Like, so the messaging was being gay is the worst thing you could be. And that was never explicitly said in my house, but I felt it. I had internalized that idea and I was like, oh, well, I can't be gay. That's terrible.
Right.
So yeah, looking at like what Misha said, I love how you parse that out. That none of that came from me. That all came from the outside. And so we are steeped in this messaging that again works so well. Like people don't know, people are best manipulated when they don't know they're being manipulated. I didn't know I was being manipulated in we hear this term internalized homophobia. I took that on and really fully believed for years, because I'm gay, I'm bad. Because I'm gay, I'm less than.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not. Straight is not the default. Hetero people are a type that exists, as are gay people, as are bi people, as are polyamorous people and pansexual people. Like, variety is the spice of life. And heteronormativity positions heterosexual as the default, the normal, the right, the good choice. They are all equally valuable. Love who you love. Try not to hate people. And it took a while for me to, parse out and realize, like, oh, I was told some really bad things about being gay, but that's just messaging. And none of it is true. And so that, I think, is a big part of unlearning sexual shame.
Wow, y'all, just blowing my mind here right at the end. Wow, the whole conversation has just been, it's been such a pleasure, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your intellectual labor, your emotional labor. Certainly, obviously, you all are working on PhDs, so you spend a lot of time and money on becoming more in tune with what's going on. And I really appreciate the space that you're creating for people where, again, where people feel that there's connection, there's not otherness, there's a space for everybody. Again, critical thinking and nuance, I think, are the theme of our topic today. So I just appreciate you both so much. I'm going to put in the show notes certainly the link to QWN on Instagram. Can you all just let me know what other things can I promote for you in this space?
Yeah, our website, Misha mentioned, queerwellnessnetwork.org. It has that chat function. So it's going to be growing, but yeah, when we have our events, we're working on providing accessible things. So these are pay what you can, donation-based events. If you can't pay, that's fine. It's more important that we give our community members the education that they need. There is that chat function where if there's something that's not currently listed on our website, just message us and we will locate some resources for you. Trying to think, we highlight a lot of sex positive and inclusive, diverse sex educators on Instagram. We are really big on shining a light on other people who are already doing great work. Like, yes, we're adding to the conversation, but we are by no means the only people out here doing this work. And we want people to know, hey, there's this sex educator, there's that inclusive therapist. And we don't know who you're going to vibe with, but we really want to connect you with some of the resources that you might not otherwise know about, so that you can go where your interests are and figure out how to understand yourself.
Truly working to help develop this network that promotes queer wellness overall, queer wellness network.
Nailed it.
It's like our name means something. Yeah.
I tied it up in a nice little bow. Well, thank you again so much for your time. Everyone out there, I'm going to add on to my be curious, not judgmental with operate in the nuance and utilize critical thinking. Thanks, y'all.